Victoria Ashford's breath stopped when she saw who was playing the janitor's 10-year-old daughter, in pigtails and a purple sweater, performing Debussy with a mastery that shouldn't exist after only 3 months of lessons. The child's hands moved across the Steinway grand piano with such impossible skill that the CEO felt her knees weaken, realizing she was witnessing the rarest gift in classical music history. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The sound stopped Victoria Ashford mid-step. It was just past 7 in the evening, and the Harrison Performing Arts Center was supposed to be empty. She'd come back to retrieve the donor portfolio she'd left in her office, her heels clicking a lonely rhythm against the marble floors. But now she stood frozen in the grand hallway, her hand pressed against the cool wall, listening to something that shouldn't exist. Piano music. Not the halting, uncertain notes of a student practicing scales. This was something else entirely. The melody poured through the closed doors of the main concert hall like liquid gold, each note crystalline and perfect, building into phrases that seemed to reach inside her chest and squeeze. It was Rachmaninoff, Piano Concerto No. 2, one of the most technically demanding pieces in the classical repertoire, and someone was playing it as if they were having a conversation with God. Victoria's breath caught. She was the CEO of the Harrison Center, one of the most prestigious performing arts venues in the country. She had heard the world's finest pianists grace that stage. She had sat through performances that brought audiences to tears and critics to their feet. But this was different. This had a raw, unpolished emotion that felt almost too intimate to witness, like stumbling upon someone pouring their heart out in prayer. Her mind raced through possibilities. Had one of the guest artists returned? Was there a late rehearsal she hadn't been informed about? But no, the calendar had been clear. The hall was dark tonight. No performances, no rehearsals, no events. Just the cleaning crew making their rounds. She moved toward the concert hall doors, her executive instincts taking over. Someone was using her facility without permission, and she needed to know who and why. But as her hand touched the brass handle, something made her pause. The music swelled, reaching a passage of such breathtaking beauty that she felt her eyes sting with unexpected tears. Whoever was playing wasn't just technically proficient, they were pouring their soul into every note, and Victoria found herself unable to interrupt. She eased the door open just a crack, peering into the darkened hall. The stage lights were off, but the work lights backstage cast a dim glow that illuminated the grand piano at center stage. And there, seated at the instrument, his back to her, was a man in a gray janitorial uniform. Victoria's world tilted slightly on its axis. Marcus Chun, the night custodian, the quiet man who had worked at the Harrison Center for the past 4 years, who mopped floors and emptied trash bins and polished brass fixtures until they gleamed. The man she had probably passed 100 times in the hallways with nothing more than a distracted nod. That man was playing Rachmaninoff like he had been born to do nothing else. Her first instinct was anger. This was inappropriate. This was a breach of trust. The Steinway concert grand on that stage was worth more than most people's house, and it was certainly not for the use of maintenance staff. But the anger died before it could fully form, drowned by the sheer impossible beauty of what she was hearing. Marcus Chun's hands moved across the keys with the confidence of a master, his body swaying slightly with the music's emotional current. The work lights caught the concentration on his face, the way his eyes were closed, the slight furrow of his brow as he navigated a particularly complex pass. Victoria found herself sinking into one of the back row seats, her portfolio forgotten on her lap. She couldn't look away. The music filled the vast space of the concert hall, every acoustic carefully designed to carry sound to perfection, and in this moment, it was doing exactly that. The piano sang under his hands, each note building on the last, creating a narrative of longing and loss and desperate, soaring hope. How long had he been doing this? Every night after the staff went home, after the last board member locked their office, did Marcus Chun slip into the concert hall and transform from invisible janitor to this? The questions piled up in her mind, but she couldn't bring herself to interrupt. Not yet. The concerto was a 20-minute piece, and Victoria sat through every moment of it transfixed. When the final notes faded into silence, hanging in the air like a held breath, she saw Marcus's shoulders slump slightly. His hands rested on the keys for a long moment, and in that silence, Victoria thought she saw him wipe at his eyes. It was only when he stood, turning to gather the cleaning supplies he'd left at the edge of the stage, that their eyes met. Marcus froze, his face going pale in the dim light. For a moment, they just stared at each other across the darkness of the auditorium. Victoria, the powerful CEO in her designer suit, and Marcus, the janitor, caught in an act that could cost him his job. "Miss Ashford." His voice was quiet, resigned. "I can explain." But Victoria found she couldn't speak. 1,000 questions fought for dominance in her mind. Where did you learn to play like that? Why are you working as a janitor? How is it possible that someone with your gift is mopping floors? But what came out instead was something she hadn't expected. That was extraordinary. Marcus blinked, clearly thrown by her response. He had been bracing for fury, for accusations, for immediate termination, not praise. His hand moved instinctively toward the piano, then fell back to his side. "I'm sorry," he said, the words automatic. "I know I shouldn't be using the instruments, He stopped, seeming to struggle for words. "I just needed to play." Needed, not wanted. The word choice struck Victoria as significant. She stood, making her way down the aisle toward toward the stage. Marcus tracked her movement with wary eyes like a deer calculating the distance to safety. How long? She asked, her heels echoing in the empty space. How long what? How long have you been playing here at night? He hesitated. 4 years. Since I started working here, I always wait until everyone's gone. I'm always careful with the instruments. I've never damaged anything, I swear. 4 years. For 4 years, one of the most gifted pianists she had ever heard had been hiding in plain sight, disguised in a custodian's uniform, playing in secret after everyone had gone home. It was absurd, it was impossible, it was heartbreak. Victoria reached the stage and looked up at him. In the dim light, she could see the fine details she'd never noticed before, the calluses on his fingers from both piano keys and mop handles, the slight gray at his temples that suggested he was older than she'd assumed, maybe late 40s, the deep lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and heavy burdens. Who are you? She asked, and it wasn't a question about his name or his employment history. It was deeper than that, more fundamental. Marcus seemed to understand. He sat down heavily on the piano bench, his shoulders sagging with the weight of a secret that had been carried too long. I used to be someone else, he said quietly, a long time ago. Victoria waited, sensing that this was a story that couldn't be rushed. Behind them, the empty concert hall felt like a confessional, a sacred space where truths could be spoken that couldn't exist anywhere else. I was a concert pianist, Marcus continued, his eyes fixed on the piano. Not a famous one, but good enough. I had a career. I played with orchestras, toured, recorded. I had a future. His hands flexed unconsciously as if remembering. And then my wife got sick. Cancer. Aggressive. Fast-moving. The kind that doesn't care about insurance coverage or payment plans. Victoria's breath caught. Understanding dawning with the weight of a falling anvil. The medical bills, Marcus said, his voice flat with old pain. They were catastrophic. We sold everything. Our house, my piano, her jewelry, my performance wardrobe, everything. But it wasn't enough. It's never enough. He looked up at Victoria, his eyes dark with memory. She died anyway. After 2 years of fighting, of hope and treatments and prayers, she died anyway. And I was left with a 6-year-old daughter and a mountain of debt that would take the rest of my life to pay off. The words settled between them like stones. Victoria thought of her own life, of the wealth and privilege she'd been born into, of the career she'd built without ever having to sacrifice anything fundamental. And here was a man who had given up everything, including his identity, to save someone he loved. So I became invisible, Marcus continued, his voice steadier now, as if telling the story was lancing an old wound. I took the first job I could find that offered health insurance and steady hours. Night custodian at a hospital, then a school, then here. He gestured around the concert hall. I told myself it was temporary, that once the debt was manageable, once my daughter was older, I could go back. But that's the thing about falling. You don't realize how far down you've gone until you try to climb back up. Victoria found herself moving closer. Climbing the few steps onto the stage, she stood a respectful distance away, but close enough to see the moisture gathering at the corners of his eyes. But you kept playing? Not for years, Marcus admitted. After Elena died, I couldn't touch a piano. Every note reminded me of what I'd lost, what I'd failed to save. But then one night about 4 years ago, I was cleaning this hall after a performance. The artist had played Chopin, nocturnes, Elena's favorites. His fingers traced the edge of the piano. I sat down just for a moment, just to remember what it felt like. And when I played, it was like she was there again, like I could talk to her. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and honest. Victoria felt something shift inside her chest, that careful professional distance she maintained crumbling in the face of such profound loss and love. Quote, this wasn't just a man playing piano in secret. That was a man keeping himself alive the only way he knew how. Your daughter, Victoria said gently. How old is she now? Lily just turned 10. For the first time, Marcus's face softened into something approaching a smile. She's smart, funny, stubborn as hell. She looks just like her mother. The smile faltered. She doesn't know about any of this, about my old life, about the music. She just knows her dad works at night and does his best. You've never told her? Marcus shook his head. What's the point? That world doesn't exist for us anymore. I'm not a concert pianist. I'm the guy who makes sure the toilets are clean and the floors shine. That's reality. He stood abruptly, moving toward his cleaning cart. And speaking of reality, I should probably clean out my locker now. I know you can't keep me after this. Sit down, Marcus. The command in Victoria's voice was unmistakable. It was the voice that had negotiated million-dollar contracts, that had stared down difficult board members, that had built one of the finest performing arts centers in the nation. Marcus, caught off guard, sat. Victoria paced the stage, her mind working through possibilities at a speed that had made her legendary in the arts world. How much debt are you still carrying? Marcus blinked. Excuse me? The medical bills? How much do you still owe? I don't see how that's relevant to humor me. He sighed, rubbing his face. About 80,000. Maybe a bit less. I've been paying it down, but the interest... He stopped, looking at her with sudden suspicion. Why? Victoria didn't answer directly. Instead, she asked, can you play tomorrow night, here on this stage for an audience? What? No, I can't. I have my shift, and Lily, forget your shift. I'm asking if you can perform professionally. If I put you in front of 500 people tomorrow night, could you play a full program? Marcus stared at her as if she'd lost her mind. Miss Ashford, I haven't performed in public in 10 years. I don't have performance clothes. I don't have a program prepared. That wasn't my question. Victoria's eyes locked onto his. Can you play? The silence stretched. Marcus looked down at his hands, his calloused, capable hands that had been scrubbing and cleaning for years, and Victoria saw the war playing out behind his eyes. Fear, hope, longing, terror, all battling for dominance. Yes, he finally whispered. God help me, yes. Victoria felt a surge of fierce satisfaction. This was what she did best. She found talent. She nurtured it. She showcased it to the world. The Harrison Center had been built on her ability to recognize brilliance, and Marcus Chun was brilliant. Tomorrow night we're hosting the annual donor gala. 300 of the wealthiest patrons in the state, plus press, plus board members. We had a pianist scheduled, but she smiled. They just canceled due to a family emergency. You're gonna lie to your donors? I'm gonna give them the performance of their lives. She stepped closer. Here's what's gonna happen. Tomorrow night you're gonna play. I'm gonna introduce you as Marcus Chun, an extraordinary pianist we've recently discovered. After the performance, when everyone is appropriately dazzled, I'm going to announce that you're our new artist in residence. Marcus's face had gone pale. Artist in residence? That's a salaried position. That's $65,000 a year. Plus benefits, plus housing in the staff apartments upstairs. Victoria ticked off the terms on her fingers. In exchange, you'll teach master classes, perform in our showcase series, and mentor our youth program. The position comes with unlimited practice room access, and obviously, you can stop mopping floors. This is insane. Marcus stood, backing away from her. You can't just. People will ask questions. They'll want to know where I came from, why they haven't heard of me. I don't have recordings, I don't have reviews, you have this. Victoria gestured to the piano. Your playing speaks for itself. Let me handle the rest. Why? Marcus's voice cracked. Why would you do this for me? You don't know me. For all you know, I could be terrible under pressure. I could choke, embarrass you in front of your precious donors. I heard you play Rachmaninoff like it was written for you personally, Victoria interrupted, her voice softening. I've heard hundreds of pianists. Marcus. Thousands. And in 5 minutes of listening to you, I heard something that made me forget to breathe. She moved closer, her eyes intense. That's not something you lose. That's not something pressure can take away. That's who you are. Underneath the uniform and the tragedy and the years of hiding. Marcus sank back onto the piano bench, his head in his hands. My daughter, he said, his voice muffled. I can't leave her alone at night while I perform. She's only 10. Bring her. The words were out before Victoria had fully thought them through, but as soon as she said them, she knew they were right. Bring Lily to the gala. There's a children's room backstage where the performers' kids wait during shows. She can watch from the wings if she wants. She should see you do this. She doesn't even know I play piano. And maybe it's time she learned who her father really is. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus looked up at Victoria and she saw the exact moment the walls began to crack. This man had spent 10 years being invisible, being less than he was, sacrificing his gift on the altar of survival. And now someone was offering him a way back. Not just to the music, but to himself. One performance, he said, his voice shaking. If it goes badly, if I embarrass you or the center, you let me go back to my old job. No questions asked. It won't go badly. You don't know that. I do. Victoria extended her hand. Do we have a deal, Mr. Chun? Marcus looked at her hand, at the lifeline she was offering, at the impossible hope of reclaiming a life he thought was dead and buried. His own hand trembled as he reached out and took hers. Her grip was firm, businesslike, but her eyes were warm with something that looked almost like understanding. We have a deal, he whispered. Victoria smiled. Good. Now go home and get some sleep. Tomorrow's gonna change everything. She paused at the edge of the stage, turning back. And Marcus, thank you. For what? For reminding me why I do this job. She gestured to the empty hall, to the space that existed solely to showcase human excellence and beauty. Sometimes I forget it's not about the donations or the board meetings or the prestige. It's about this. It's about finding the music that needs to be heard and making sure the world hears it. After she left, Marcus sat alone in the darkened hall for a long time, staring at the piano. Tomorrow night he would step out of the shadows. Tomorrow night he would be Marcus Chun the pianist again, not Marcus Chun the janitor. The thought terrified him, but underneath the terror, like a flower pushing through concrete, was something he hadn't felt in 10 years. Hope. The apartment was quiet when Marcus finally got home at 3 in the morning. It was a small 2-bedroom place in a neighborhood that had seen better days, but it was clean and safe, and He moved quietly through the darkened living room, past the secondhand sofa and the bookshelf overflowing with Lily's books, and stopped at her bedroom door. She was curled under her blankets, her dark hair spread across the pillow in a way that made his chest ache with how much she looked like Elena. On her nightstand was the photograph she kept there always, a picture of her mother holding her as a baby, both of them laughing at something just outside the frame. Lily had been too young when Elena died to remember much, but she clung to the fragments she had like precious gems. Marcus watched her sleep for a long moment, his mind spinning. How was he supposed to tell her? How could he explain that the father she knew, the one who worked nights and came home smelling like cleaning products, had another life she'd never known about, that he hadn't just been a janitor, but someone who had once stood on stages and made music that moved people to tears. He couldn't do it. Not yet. Not until he knew whether he could actually pull off what Victoria Ashford was asking. If tomorrow night was a disaster, if 10 years away from the stage had robbed him of whatever magic he'd once possessed, then there would be no point in telling Lily about a dream that had died with her mother. Sleep didn't come as Seeley. Marcus lay in his own bed, staring at the ceiling, his fingers unconsciously moving through passages of music on the worn comforter. He ran through his mental repertoire, trying to decide what to play. The Rachmaninoff was too long, too demanding for a gala performance where people would be talking and drinking. He needed something shorter, more accessible, but still powerful enough to justify Victoria's faith in him. Chopin. The answer came to him as the first light of dawn began to creep through his thin curtains. He would play the Ballade No. 1, followed by several nocturnes, Elena's favorites. It felt right, like she would be there with him, guiding his hands. The smell of burning toast woke him a few hours later. Marcus bolted upright, disoriented, realizing he'd fallen asleep without setting his alarm. Sunlight was streaming through the window. It was past noon. He stumbled out of bed and into the kitchen, where he found Lily standing on a chair in front of the toaster, trying to scrape black char off a piece of bread. "I was making you breakfast," she announced, not turning around, "but I think the toaster is broken." "Toaster is fine, sweetheart. You just have to watch it." Marcus moved beside her, gently taking the butter knife from her hand and lifting her down from the chair. "What are you doing up at Saturday?" "I thought you'd sleep until 2. I had a nightmare." Lily's face was serious in that way 10-year-olds have when they're trying to be brave. "About Mom. I dreamed she was calling me, but I couldn't find her." Marcus's heart clenched. He knelt down, pulling her into a hug. "I'm sorry, Lily Bell. Those dreams are hard. Do you ever dream about her?" Lily's voice was muffled against his shoulder. "All the time." It wasn't a lie. Elena haunted his dreams in his waking hours. A beautiful ghost he couldn't quite let go of. "Hey, I need to talk to you about something kind of big." Lily pulled back, her eyes widening. "Are we moving? Please don't say we're moving. I finally made friends at school and we're not moving." Marcus led her to the couch, trying to figure out how to phrase this. "Tonight there's this event at my work, a fancy party for important people, and my boss asked if I wanted to bring you. There would be other kids there and food, and you want me to come to your work?" Lily looked suspicious. "Why?" Because Marcus hesitated, then decided on a version of the truth. "Because it's a special night and I want you there. Plus there's a buffet with chocolate fountain." The mention of chocolate worked its magic. Lily's face lit up. "Really? Can I wear my dress? The purple one Grandma sent for my birthday?" "Absolutely. You'll be the prettiest girl there. What time do we have to leave?" Marcus glanced at the clock. He had 8 hours until the gala. 8 hours to prepare himself mentally, to practice, to transform back into someone he hadn't been in a decade. "Around 6. That gives you time for a nap if you want." "I'm not a baby, Dad. I don't need naps." Lily rolled her eyes with the dramatic flair of a preteen. "Can I watch TV?" "Sure, sweetheart." As Lily settled in front of the television, Marcus retreated to his bedroom and closed the door. His hands were shaking. The reality of what he'd agreed to was starting to hit him in waves. He had no formal performance attire. His fingers, while still nimble, weren't conditioned for a full performance. His stage presence, that indefinable quality that separated a good musician from a captivating one, had been buried under years of invisibility. He pulled out his phone and stared at it for a long moment before dialing. The number was one he hadn't called in 5 years, but he still knew it by heart. "Hello?" The voice was cautious, suspicious of unknown numbers. "David." "It's Marcus." Silence. Then Marcus Chun? "Jesus, I thought you were dead." "Close enough." Marcus managed a weak laugh. David Park had been his closest friend in the music world, a violinist who had performed with him countless times. They'd lost touch after Elena died, after Marcus had dropped out of sight. "I need a favor. A big one. Name it." "I need to borrow a suit. A performance suit. I need it by tonight." Another pause. "You're performing? Where? When? What the hell happened to you, Marcus? You disappeared. Nobody knew where you went or if you were okay. It's a long story." Marcus pinched the bridge of his nose. "I've been working, surviving, but tonight I have a chance. Maybe my only chance, and I need to not look like I've been living in a shoebox for 10 years. What size are you now?" Marcus gave him the measurements. He'd lost weight over the years, the stress and the manual labor burning away anything extra. "I think I have something that'll work. Where do you need it?" Marcus gave him the address of the Harrison Center. "Can you drop it off around 5? And David, thank you. Hey, we're friends. Besides," David's voice softened, "I've missed you, man. The music world is less interesting without you in it. I'm glad you're coming back. I don't know if I am. This might be a one-time thing. We'll see." There was a smile in David's voice. "Trust me, once you get back on that stage, you'll remember who you are. See you at 5. After hanging up, Marcus sat on the edge of his bed, overwhelmed. So many pieces were falling into place, but the central question remained, could he actually do this? Could he walk out onto that stage in front of 300 people and be the musician he used to be? He stood and looked at his reflection in the small mirror hanging on his closet door. The man looking back at him was tired, worn down by years of struggle, but underneath, if he looked hard enough, he could still see traces of the person he'd been, the artist, the performer, the man Elena had fallen in love with because he could make a piano sing. The afternoon passed in a blur. Marcus tried to rest but couldn't. He made lunch for Lily, watched her practice cartwheels in the living room, helped her pick out shoes to match her purple dress. Normal dad things. But underneath it all, his mind was running through fingerings and dynamics, hearing the music he would play tonight in an endless loop. At 4:30, Victoria called. "How are you holding up?" "Terrified." "Good. That means you care." Her voice was warm, encouraging. "David Park called me. He's a friend of yours? Was? Is? I don't know. We lost touch. Well, he vouched for you. Told me you were one of the finest pianists he'd ever worked with. Said watching you perform was like watching someone have a religious experience." She paused. "He also said if I was lying to you about this opportunity, he'd personally make sure I regretted it, despite his nerves." Marcus smiled. "That sounds like David. He's bringing your suit at 5. I've also arranged for someone to meet you backstage at 6:30. Her name is Margaret. She used to work in opera, knows everything about stage presence and performance prep. She'll help you get ready. You've thought of everything. It's what I do." Victoria's tone shifted, becoming more serious. "Marcus, I want you to know something. Whatever happens tonight, you've already won. You agreed to step back into the light. That took more courage than most people have." Marcus's throat tightened. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Thank me after you've blown everyone away and we're celebrating with champagne." She hung up, leaving Marcus holding the phone and wondering how his life had changed so completely in less than 24 hours. At 6 o'clock, he and Lily left the apartment. She was resplendent in her purple dress, her hair in pigtails, chattering excitedly about the chocolate fountain. Marcus wore his regular clothes, carrying the garment bag David had delivered. Inside was a beautiful black suit, perfectly tailored with a crisp white shirt and simple black tie. Looking at it made everything feel suddenly, frighteningly real. The Harrison Center was transformed when they arrived. The lobby was filled with well-dressed people sipping cocktails, a string quartet playing in the corner. Lily's eyes went wide. "Dad, this is fancy." "It is, isn't it?" Marcus took her hand, feeling completely out of place in his jeans and old jacket. A security guard approached, but Victoria appeared seemingly from nowhere, intervening. "Mr. Chun, perfect timing." She smiled at Lily. "And you must be Lily. That is a gorgeous dress." Lily beamed. "Thank you. My grandma sent it." "Well, your grandma has excellent taste." Victoria gestured toward a side hallway. "Come on, let me show you around backstage." The backstage area of the Harrison Center was a world Lily had never seen. Narrow hallways painted black, with cables taped to the floor, and mysterious doors marked with technical terms she didn't understand. Marcus knew every inch of it from his years of cleaning, but seeing it through Lily's excited eyes made it feel new again, magical rather than mundane. Victoria led them to a comfortable room with couches, a television, and a table laden with snacks. 2 other children were already there, a boy around 8 playing a handheld game and a teenage girl scrolling through her phone. "This is the green room for our young guests," Victoria explained to Lily. "There's an assistant here who'll make sure you have everything you need, and when it's time for your dad to perform, she'll take you to a special spot in the wings where you can watch." Lily's head whipped toward Marcus, her eyes enormous. "Perform? What does she mean, perform?" Marcus knelt down to her level, his heart hammering. This was it, the moment he had to tell her whether he was ready or not. "Remember how I said tonight was special? It's because I'm going to play piano for all these people. You play piano?" Lily's voice was a mixture of confusion and wonder. "Since when? Since before you were born? Since before I met your mom?" Marcus reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I used to be a pianist, Lily. A professional one. It was my job, my whole life. But when your mom got sick, I had to stop. I had to focus on taking care of both of you." Lily was silent, processing this information. Her young mind was clearly trying to reconcile the father she knew, the one who came home tired and smelling of cleaning supplies, with this new person he was claiming to be. "But you're a janitor," she finally said, not accusingly, just stating a fact. "I am. I have been for a long time. But before that, I was a musician, and tonight, just for tonight, I get to be one again. Are you good?" The question was so earnest, so purely childlike that Marcus felt his eyes sting. "I don't know anymore, sweetheart. It's been a long time, but I'm going to try my best." Lily threw her arms around his neck, squeezing tight. "You'll be the best one there," she whispered fiercely. "I know you will." Victoria cleared her throat softly. "Marcus, we should get you to your dressing room. You need to get ready." She smiled at Lily. "Don't worry. You'll see him again before he goes on stage." Marcus reluctantly pulled away from his daughter, following Victoria down another corridor. She stopped at a door marked with a gold star, the kind of dressing room reserved for featured performers. Inside it was small but elegant, with a makeup mirror surrounded by lights, a rack for clothes, and a small sofa. "Margaret will be here in 5 minutes," Victoria said. "She'll help you with anything you need. There's water, tea, whatever you want. The performance starts at 8. You'll go on at 8:45 after the dinner course, but before dessert. You'll have the stage for about 30 minutes. Marcus nodded, his mouth dry. 30 minutes. He could do 30. He'd done entire evenings, 2-hour recitals, but that was another lifetime ago. "Marcus," Victoria's voice was gentle. "Breathe. You're going to be magnificent. How do you know?" "Because I heard you when you thought no one was listening. That's when people are most honest. Most themselves." She moved toward the door, then paused. "Your daughter doesn't know what she's about to witness. She's about to see her father transform. That's a gift, Marcus. Not many children get to see their parents as heroes." After she left, Marcus hung up the suit David had lent him and sank onto the sofa. His hands were trembling. He pressed them together, trying to steady them, trying to remember the mental exercises he used to do before performances. "Center yourself. Feel the music. Trust your training. The knock on the door made him jump. Come in! Margaret turned out to be a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She sized him up immediately. You're terrified. That obvious? Only to someone who's seen it 1,000 times before. She sat beside him on the sofa. Let me tell you something. I've worked with opera singers who threw up before every performance. Ballet dancers who cried in the wings. The nerves don't mean you're not ready. They mean you care. She patted his knee. Now let's talk logistics. Have you walked the stage today? Marcus shook his head. I know the space. I've cleaned it often enough. Cleaning it and performing on it are two very different things. Come on, she stood, offering her hand. We're going to do a stage walk before the guests start arriving in the hall. The auditorium was mostly empty when they entered from the wings. Staff were setting up tables, adjusting lighting, testing sound. The stage itself was bare except for the magnificent Steinway grand piano positioned at center, spotlit like a jewel. Margaret led him onto the stage. Stand here. This is where you'll enter from. Walk to the piano like you own it. Not arrogant, just confident. You belong here. Remember that. Marcus walked to the piano, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. He sat on the bench, adjusted it slightly, let his fingers hover over the keys without pressing. From this position, he could see the entire hall, row upon row of seats rising into shadow. In a few hours, those seats would be filled with people, watching him, judging him. Now look up, Margaret instructed. Don't look at the keys when you perform. Look at the audience. Connect with them. Make them feel like you're playing just for them. Marcus lifted his eyes and was suddenly transported back to another stage, another lifetime. He remembered the electricity of performance. The way the world fell away until there was nothing but the music and the connection between performer and audience. He remembered feeling powerful, purposeful, alive in a way that nothing else could match. There it is, Margaret said softly. I can see it in your face. You remember what it feels like? I do. Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper. God help me, I do. They ran through the practical details. Where to bow, when to sit, how to handle the applause. It felt strange and familiar all at once, like slipping into clothes that used to fit perfectly but had been packed away so long he'd forgotten their feel. By 7:30, the guests were beginning to arrive. Marcus watched from the wings as the auditorium filled with wealthy patrons in evening gowns and tuxedos. He recognized some of them, people he'd passed in hallways, whose offices he'd cleaned, who had never given him a second glance. Tonight, they would see him, really see him. Victoria found him at 8:15. How are you doing? I keep thinking about all the ways this can go wrong. Stop thinking. She handed him a glass of water. Just feel. That's what you did last night when I heard you. You weren't thinking. You were just letting the music flow through you. Marcus drank the water, grateful for something to do with his shaking hand. Is Lily? She's fine. Ate her weight in chocolate-covered strawberries and made friends with the other kids. She's excited to watch you. Victoria checked her watch. 25 minutes. I'm going to introduce you myself. I'll keep it brief, just your name and the pieces you'll be playing. The rest is up to you. After she left, Marcus changed into the suit. It fit perfect, as if David had remembered his exact measurements from years ago. He looked at himself in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. Clean-cut, professional, looking like he belonged on a concert stage rather than pushing a mop bucket. There was another knock. Come in. Lily peeked around the door, her eyes going wide when she saw him. Dad, you look like a prince. Marcus laughed, the sound shaky. Come here, Lilybell. She walked to him and he knelt down so they were eye level. I need to tell you something. When your mom was alive, she used to say that music was my language, that I could say things with a piano that I couldn't say with words. He took her small hands in his. Tonight when I play, I'm going to be talking to her, telling her all the things I never got to say goodbye. But I'm also going to be talking to you, telling you how much I love you, how proud I am to be your dad. Lily's eyes were shining with tears. Will I understand it? The music talk? Just listen with your heart instead of your ears. You'll understand. She hugged him tight, and for a moment Marcus felt like maybe, just maybe, he could actually do this. Not for Victoria or the donors or even for himself, for this little girl who believed her father could do anything. The stage assistant appeared. Mr. Chun, 5 minutes. Marcus's stomach dropped. Lily was escorted back to her viewing spot in the wings by a kind-looking woman who promised she'd have the perfect view. Margaret appeared with final words of encouragement. Remember, you're not performing for them. You're sharing something precious. There's a difference. Then he was alone in the dim backstage area, listening to the murmur of 300 voices on the other side of the curtain. He closed his eyes and thought of Elena, of Lily, of all the years he'd spent hiding from this moment. He thought of Victoria's faith in him, of David's friendship, of the gift he'd been given and then buried. The stage manager touched his arm gently. You're on in 60 seconds. Marcus took a deep breath and stepped into position in the wings. Through a gap in the curtain, he could see Victoria walking onto the stage, the spotlight following her. The crowd quieted. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being here tonight. Victoria's voice was warm, commanding. Before we move to dessert, I have a very special treat for you. We've recently discovered an extraordinary talent, a pianist of remarkable skill and depth. I had the privilege of hearing him play, and I can honestly say it was one of the most moving musical experiences of my life. She paused, letting the anticipation build. Please join me in welcoming Marcus Chun. The applause was polite, curious but reserved. These people didn't know him. They were probably wondering why their evening was being interrupted by an unknown pianist when they'd been promised a celebrated performer. Marcus felt every eye on him as he stepped into the light. The walk to the piano felt like crossing an ocean. His legs moved automatically, muscle memory from 1,000 performances carrying him forward even as his mind screamed at him to run. The stage lights were hot on his face, the audience a dark mass of shapes and glittering jewelry beyond the footlights. He reached the piano and turned to bow, the gesture feeling both foreign and achingly familiar. As he settled onto the bench, adjusting its height with hands that had somehow stopped shaking, he made the mistake of looking into the wings. Lily was there, standing beside the stage manager, her face a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She gave him a little wave, and something inside Marcus's chest cracked open. He turned to the keys. They gleamed under the spotlight, black and white, a landscape he knew better than the lines of his own palm. For 10 years he had played in secret, in darkness, with no one listening. Now 300 people waited in silence for him to prove he deserved to be here. His fingers found the opening position for Chopin's Ballade No. 1. He took a breath, remembering Margaret's words. Don't perform for them, bear something precious. He thought of Elena, the first time he'd played this piece for her. How she'd cried and told him it sounded like a conversation between hope and heartbreak. He began to play. The first notes fell into the silence like drops of water into a still pool, soft, contemplative, questioning. Marcus felt the familiar sensation of the world narrowing until there was nothing but the music and the connection between his heart and his hands. The ballad began simply, almost hesitantly, the melody searching for itself. It was how he had felt after Elena died. Lost and uncertain, fumbling in the dark for meaning. Then the music began to build. The left hand established a rolling pattern while the right hand sang out with increasing confidence. This was the part where grief transformed into memory, where loss became love. Marcus's body swayed slightly as he played, his eyes closed, no longer aware of the audience or the lights or anything beyond the piano. In the wings, Lily watched with her mouth slightly open. She had never seen her father like this. The man who made her breakfast and helped with homework and fell asleep on the couch during movies was gone, replaced by someone who seemed to be having a conversation with invisible forces. His face was peaceful but intense, his whole body engaged in creating sound. She didn't understand everything the music was saying, but she understood that it was important, that her father was speaking in a language she was just beginning to hear. In the audience, the reserved politeness was transforming into something else. People had stopped adjusting in their seats. Wine glasses paused halfway to lips. A woman in the third row felt tears prick her eyes without understanding why. The music was doing what great music always does, bypassing the intellect and speaking directly to the soul. Victoria stood at the back of the auditorium, her arms crossed, a slight smile on her face. She had been right, gambled everything on her instinct, on what she'd heard in an empty concert hall at night, and she had been absolutely gloriously right. Marcus Chun wasn't just good, he was transcendent. The ballad moved through its sections, each one a different emotional landscape. There was anger, a passage where the notes crashed and tumbled over each other like waves against rocks. Marcus poured 10 years of frustration into those measures, every indignity of invisible labor, every night spent exhausted and alone, every dream deferred, and hope abandoned. His hands flew across the keys with a precision that spoke of thousands of hours of practice, of a gift that had never truly left him, despite the years of neglect. Then came the tender middle section, and Marcus softened. This was Elena. This was the love that had defined him. The melody was almost unbearably beautiful, each note placed with such care that it felt like handling something precious and fragile. He played as if he were telling her all the things he'd never gotten to say, as if the music could bridge the gap between the living and the dead. A man in the front row, a board member who'd heard countless performances in this hall, found himself leaning forward unconsciously. There was something raw here, something unrehearsed and honest that you couldn't manufacture or fake. This wasn't a pianist showing off technique. This was a human being opening his chest and showing everyone his beating heart. The ballad built toward its climax, the music becoming more urgent, more passionate. This was the fight, the refusal to give up, the determination to keep going even when everything was lost. Marcus's hands moved with absolute authority now. Every ounce of doubt burned away in the fire of the music. He was no longer the janitor. He was no longer the broken man who'd hidden from his gift. He was Marcus Chun, pianist, and he was speaking the only language that had ever truly mattered to him. Lily felt something shift inside her as she watched. She was too young to articulate it, but she was witnessing her father's resurrection. The man at the piano was the same person who tucked her in at night, but he was also someone else, someone bigger and brighter and more fully alive than she'd ever seen him. It was like watching a flower bloom in fast motion, like seeing a bird take flight for the first time. The ballad rushed toward its conclusion, the themes from earlier in the piece returning, transformed, wiser, more resolved. The anger and grief hadn't disappeared, that they'd been integrated into something larger, something that acknowledged pain but refused to be defined by it. Marcus's whole body was engaged now, his shoulders moving, his foot working the pedals, his face showing every emotion the music demanded. And then, with a series of powerful chords that seemed to shake the very air, it was over. The final notes hung in the space like a held breath, gradually fading into silence. For 3 full seconds, no one moved. The silence was so complete that Marcus could hear his own breathing, could hear the slight creak of the piano bench as he shifted his weight. He kept his hands on the keys, afraid afraid to break the spell, afraid to turn and see disappointment or worse, polite indifference. Then the applause started. It began with a single person, someone in the middle of the hall, standing up. Then another person stood, and another. Within seconds, the entire auditorium was on its feet, the applause building like thunder, like a wave, like a force of nature. People weren't just clapping politely. They were shouting bravos, their faces showing genuine emotion, genuine awe. Marcus turned on the bench, stunned. He stood and bowed, and the applause grew even louder. He could see faces now, individual people, and many of them had tears streaming down their cheeks. A woman in the front row was clutching her husband's arm, her face radiant with joy. The board member who'd been leaning forward was clapping with his hands above his head, grinning like a child. In the wings, Lily was jumping up and down, clapping so hard her hands hurt. The stage manager beside her was wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Your dad is something special," she whispered to Lily, who nodded vigorously, too excited to speak. Victoria remained at the back, not applauding yet, just watching Marcus's face as he realized what he'd done. He looked dazed, overwhelmed, like a man waking from a 10-year sleep. She saw the exact moment it hit him. The moment he understood that this wasn't a fluke or a lucky accident. He was still who he'd always been. The gift hadn't left him. It had been waiting, patient and faithful, for him to come back. Marcus bowed again, his vision blurring with tears he didn't try to hide. The applause continued, showing no signs of stopping. According to performance etiquette, he should leave the stage now, let them applaud for a moment, then return for a second bow if they were still clapping. But his legs felt weak, and he found himself sitting back down at the piano instead. The audience quieted gradually, sensing he had more to say. Marcus adjusted his position on the bench and placed his hands on the keys again. He hadn't planned this. The program called for several nocturnes, a carefully curated set that would take exactly 30 minutes. But in this moment, with his heart cracked open and his daughter watching from the wings and 300 strangers who had just seen him truly for the first time, he knew what he needed to play. It was a piece Elena had loved, a simple nocturne that she'd asked him to play on their wedding day. She'd said it sounded like starlight, like the moment just before dawn when the world holds its breath in anticipation. He'd played it at her funeral, though he could barely see the keys through his tears. He hadn't played it since, until now. The first notes fell into the expectant silence like gentle rain. This was different from the ballad, simpler, more intimate. It was a lullaby, a love song, a prayer. Marcus played it the way he'd played it for Alina on their wedding day, with all the tenderness he possessed. And he felt her presence so strongly it was as if she were sitting beside him on the bench. This was for her. This was for Lily. This was for everyone who had ever loved someone and lost them and somehow found the courage to keep going. When the nocturne ended, the silence that followed was different from before. It wasn't the stunned silence of surprise, but something deeper, more reverent. People sat in their seats, many with their heads bowed, as if they'd just witnessed something sacred. Then the applause came again. Softer this time, but no less sincere, the sound of genuine gratitude. Marcus stood and bowed one final time. As he walked toward the wings, his legs finally remembered how to work, carrying him off the stage and into the darkness where Lily waited. She crashed into him the moment he was out of sight of the audience, her arms wrapping around his waist with surprising strength. "Daddy, you were magic," she whispered into his chest. "Real magic." Marcus knelt down and pulled her close, not caring that his eyes were streaming or that his hands were shaking from adrenaline. "Did you understand it? The music?" Lily nodded against his shoulder. "You were talking to Mom. I heard you telling her you miss her. And then you told her about me, about how we're okay even though we miss her too." She pulled back to look at him, her face serious. "She heard you, Daddy." "I know she did." The simplicity of her faith undid him completely. Marcus held his daughter and cried, not from sadness, but from a release he hadn't known he needed. For 10 years, he'd been carrying everything alone, believing that showing emotion was weakness, that breaking down meant giving up. But here, in the dark wings of a concert hall, holding his daughter who had just witnessed his resurrection, he understood that the opposite was true. This was strength, this was courage, this was love. Victoria gave them a few moments before approaching. When Marcus finally stood, wiping his face with the back of his hand, she was smiling with an expression that looked suspiciously like pride. "I told you," she said simply. "You did." Marcus's voice was rough. "Thank you for everything. For believing in something you had no reason to believe in." "I had every reason." "I heard you play." Victoria glanced at Lily, then back at Marcus. "The board wants to meet you. Several donors are already asking about booking you for private events. And the press is going to want interviews. Your life is about to get very complicated very quickly." The thought should have terrified him, but Marcus found he was too emotionally exhausted to feel anything but a strange, floating numbness. "Can it wait until tomorrow?" "It can wait until Monday." Victoria's smile widened. "Go home. Sleep. Spend time with your daughter. We'll figure out the details of your new life next week." His new life. The phrase hung in the air like a promise. Marcus took Lily's hand and they made their way through the backstage corridors toward the exit, but they were intercepted multiple times. Staff members who had seen him every night for 4 years suddenly looked at him with new eyes, congratulating him, shaking his hand. A few of them seemed genuinely moved, expressing how proud they were to have worked alongside him. It was David Park who found them in the lobby. He was older than Marcus remembered, with gray threading through his dark hair, but his smile was the same. "You son of a bitch, he said, pulling Marcus into a bear hug. You still have it. You never lost it. David, this is my daughter, Lily. Lily, this is an old friend. David knelt down to Lily's level, his expression warm. Your dad and I used to perform together. Did you know that? Lily shook her head, still processing all these revelations about her father's hidden past. He was the best pianist I ever worked with, and I've worked with a lot of pianists. David stood, his hand on Marcus's shoulder. We need to talk, really talk. There are people who would love to hear you play again. Chamber groups, orchestras, venues across the country. I have a job now, Marcus said, the words feeling surreal. Artist in residence here, and that's a start. But Marcus, you're too good to stay in one place. You should be touring, recording, sharing this gift with the world. Marcus looked down at Lily, who was yawning despite her best efforts to stay alert. Let's take it one step at a time. Right now, I need to get this one home to bed. David nodded. Understanding. Call me. We have a lot to catch up on. He handed Marcus a business card with his contact information. I mean it. Don't disappear again. The ride home on the bus felt dreamlike. Lily dozed against Marcus's shoulder while he stared out the window at the city lights, trying to process what had just happened. In the span of 24 hours, his entire existence had been turned inside out. He was no longer invisible. He was no longer just the janitor. He was Marcus Chun, pianist. And the world was suddenly full of possibilities he'd thought were dead and buried. Their apartment looked exactly as they'd left it, but Marcus saw it differently now. The worn furniture, the cramped space, the general shabbiness, it all represented the sacrifice he'd made, the years of putting survival over dreams. But it had been worth it. Lily was healthy, fed, safe. She'd had a childhood, even if it wasn't the one he'd hoped to give her. He carried her to bed, helping her out of her purple dress and into pajamas while she mumbled sleepily about chocolate fountains and magic music. As he tucked her in, she grabbed his hand. Daddy? Can I learn to play piano like you? The question hit him with unexpected force. In all his years of hiding from music, it had never occurred to him that Lily might want to learn. He'd been so focused on keeping that world separate from her, protecting her from the pain associated with it, that he'd never considered she might have inherited Elena's love of music or his own gift. Do you want to? He asked softly. I want to talk like you do, with music. Her eyes were already closing, but she smiled. I want to tell Mom things too. Marcus kissed her forehead, his heart full. Then yes, Lilybell, I'll teach you. I promise. She was asleep before he left the room. Marcus walked back to the living room and sank onto the couch, finally allowing himself to fully feel the exhaustion. His hands ached from playing, a good ache he'd forgotten existed. His mind was spinning with everything that had happened, everything that might happen next. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. 14 requests for interviews tomorrow. 23 inquiries about future performances. You're officially famous. Sleep well, Maestro. Marcus stared at the message, then at the photo of Elena on the mantelpiece. She was smiling in it, the way she always smiled when she looked at him, like he was the most interesting person in the world. He wondered what she would think of tonight, of his return to music, of the future that was suddenly opening before him. He thought she'd be proud, but more than that, he thought she'd be relieved. For too long, he'd been surviving rather than living, existing rather than thriving. He told himself it was noble, this sacrifice, this putting away of his gift, but maybe the real nobility was in reclaiming it, in showing Lily that dreams don't have to die just because circumstances change. The next few days passed in a blur. Victoria was true to her word about waiting until Monday to discuss business, but that didn't stop the world from finding Marcus anyway. A music journalist tracked down his phone number and called at 7 in the morning on Sunday. A classical music blogger posted a glowing review of his performance, calling him a revelation, a phoenix rising from the ashes of obscurity. By Monday morning, the video of his performance that someone had recorded on their phone had gone viral in the small but passionate world of classical music enthusiasts. Marcus met with Victoria in her office, a space he'd cleaned countless times but never actually inhabited as a guest. She had papers spread across her desk, a schedule, contracts, publicity materials. This is what I'm proposing, she said, her CEO persona fully engaged. You start as artist in residence immediately. That means teaching 3 masterclasses a week, performing in our showcase series once a month, and mentoring our youth orchestra. In exchange, you get a salary, benefits, and an apartment in our residence hall upstairs. An apartment? Marcus's mind immediately went to logistics. But Lily, it's a 2-bedroom, fully furnished. You'd be on site, which means you could practice whenever you want, and Lily would be close to downtown schools. Better schools than Victoria paused diplomatically. Better than what's available in your current neighborhood. Marcus thought of their cramped apartment, of Lily's tiny bedroom, of the noise from neighbors and the constant worry about safety. What's the catch? No catch. This is how we treat our featured artists. You're not staff anymore, Marcus. You're talent. She slid a paper across the desk. This is the contract. Read it carefully. Consult a lawyer if you want, but I think you'll find the terms more than fair. He scanned the document, his eyes stopping on the salary figure. It was triple what he'd been making as a janitor. It wasn't enough to be wealthy, but it was enough to live with dignity. to stop worrying about every dollar, to maybe even start paying down the medical debt that had haunted him for a decade. "There's one more thing," Victoria said. "I want to establish a scholarship program in Elena's name for families facing medical hardship who have children interested in music. You'd help select the recipients, maybe mentor some of them." Marcus's eyes stung. "Why would you do that?" "Because everyone should have the chance you had tonight, the chance to reclaim what they thought was lost." Victoria's expression softened. "And because your story matters, Marcus. Not just the triumph, but the struggle. People need to know that it's possible to come back from the edge." He signed the contract there and then, his hands steady, his heart full of a hope he'd thought was dead. They spent the next hour discussing logistics, timelines, the move to the new apartment. It was decided that Marcus would officially start his new position in 2 weeks, giving him time to transition, to prepare, to wrap his mind around the magnitude of the change. "One more thing," Victoria said as he stood to the youth orchestra. "They're preparing for a spring showcase. Would you be willing to work with them? They're talented kids, but they need guidance. Inspiration." "Of course, I'd be honored." "Good. They rehearse Tuesday evenings. I'll introduce you tomorrow night." She smiled. "I think you'll like them. Some of them remind me of you, hungry, passionate, maybe a little rough around the edges, but full of potential." That evening, Marcus sat with Lily at the old upright piano in the Harrison Center's practice rooms. Victoria had given him a key, told him to use the facilities whenever he wanted. The instrument wasn't a Steinway grand, but it was in tune and the action was smooth, and sitting here with his daughter felt like stepping into a future he'd been afraid to imagine. "Put your fingers here," Marcus said gently, positioning Lily's small hands on the keys. "This is middle C. Everything starts from here." Lily pressed the key and the single note rang out clear and pure. Her eyes lit up. "That's pretty. Now try this one. This is D." Marcus guided her through the basic scale, C to C, watching as she concentrated with the fierce determination he recognized from her mother. Elena had approached everything that way, with total commitment, as if the simple act of learning a scale was the most important thing in the world. What surprised him was how naturally Lily's fingers found the keys. She didn't poke at them tentatively like most beginners. Her touch was assured, instinctive. When he showed her a simple melody, just 5 notes, she played it back to him perfectly on the first try, even matching the rhythm he'd demonstrated. "Like this?" she asked, playing it again, this time adding a tiny variation at the end that he hadn't shown her. Marcus felt something stir in his chest. A mixture of pride and wonder and something that felt almost like fear. "Exactly like that, sweetheart. Have you played piano before?" Lily shook her head. "But I've listened to you. At night, sometimes I hear music in my dreams and it sounds like this." Played a few more notes, improvising a simple melody that somehow made musical sense despite her complete lack of training. For the next hour, Marcus introduced her to basic concepts, finger positions, note reading, simple rhythms. But what should have taken weeks of patient instruction, Lily absorbed in minutes. She didn't just learn, she understood. It was as if the music was already inside her, just waiting for someone to show her how to let it out. "Can I try the song you played at the big concert?" Lily asked, looking up at him with hopeful eyes. "The ballad?" "Sweetheart, that's very advanced. It takes years of practice before just the beginning part, the quiet part." Marcus hesitated, then played the opening measures of Chopin's Ballad No. 1, the simple, questioning melody that began the piece. "This part?" Lily nodded, watching his hands with absolute focus. He played it again, slower this time, and she studied his finger positions like she was memorizing a map. Then she placed her own small hands on the keys and played the phrase back to him. It was halting, uncertain, with several wrong notes, but the intention was there, the musical understanding. She'd captured the essence of the melody, even if her fingers couldn't yet execute it perfectly. Marcus stared at his daughter, his mind racing. He'd taught music before, had worked with talented students, but this was different. This wasn't just talent. This was something extraordinary, something that defied normal learning curves. Lily had her mother's determination and her father's, and the combination was producing something he hadn't anticipated. "You're very good at this, Lily Bell," he said softly, "because you're teaching me." She smiled up at him with such trust, such innocent faith, that Marcus felt his throat tight. "Can we practice every day?" "Every single day," he promised. Tuesday evening came quickly. Marcus arrived at the rehearsal hall where the youth orchestra practiced to find 15 teenagers in various states of teenage disarray, instruments in hand, chatting and laughing with the careless energy of the young. They fell silent when he walked in, their expressions ranging from curious to skeptical. A janitor turned pianist was apparently something they needed to see to believe. Victoria made the introductions. "Everyone, this is Marcus Chun, our new artist in residence. He's going to be working with you on your spring showcase." She turned to Marcus. "They're preparing a challenging program. Vivaldi, some Brahms, and they're attempting Shostakovich's Chamber Symphony." Marcus raised his eyebrows. "That's ambitious." "We're good," said a girl with a violin, her tone defensive. "We've been working on it for months." "I'm sure you are," Marcus replied evenly. "Let's hear what you've got." They launched into the Shostakovich, and within 30 seconds, Marcus could hear both their potential and their problems. They had technical skill. These were clearly talented young musicians, but they were playing as individuals, not as an ensemble. The strings were slightly ahead of the winds, the dynamics were unbalanced, and there was no cohesion, no unified interpretation of. He let them finish the movement before stopping them. "That was good," he said, and meant it. "You have the notes. You have the technique, but you're not listening to each other. Music isn't about playing your part correctly. It's about being in conversation with everyone else. A boy with a cello crossed his arm. We've been working on this for 4 months. Our last conductor said we were ready. Your last conductor was wrong. Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. You're not ready, but you could be. He walked to the front of the room. Let's try something. Put down your instruments. They exchanged confused glances but complied. Marcus had them form a circle, then asked them to start clapping a simple rhythm, one person at a time, building a pattern. At first it was chaotic, people coming in at the wrong times, the rhythm stuttering and breaking, but gradually they began to sync up, to listen to each other, to become aware of the group's sound rather than just their individual part. Now pick up your instruments and play the opening of the Shostakovich again. But this time, don't just play your part. Listen to everyone around you. Find where your voice fits into the conversation. This time, when they played, something shifted. It wasn't perfect, not by a long shot, but there was a coherence that hadn't been there before, a sense of ensemble. The girl with the violin looked up in surprise when she heard how her part wove through the cello line. The boy with the clarinet adjusted his dynamics without being told, creating space for the strings to breathe. When they finished, there was a moment of stunned silence. Then someone started laughing, the sound of genuine delight. "Oh my God," the violin girl said. "That actually sounded good. That sounded like music," Marcus corrected. "And that's what we're gonna build on." He worked with them for 2 hours, breaking down passages, helping them hear how their individual parts contributed to the whole, teaching them to communicate through sound rather than just executing notes on a page. By the end of the rehearsal, they were exhausted but energized, their initial skepticism replaced by genuine engagement. As they packed up their instruments, several of them approached Marcus to thank him, to ask questions, to express their excitement about work. The violin girl, whose name was Sophie, lingered after the others had left. "Mr. Chun?" Her voice was hesitant. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. I heard about your performance at the gala. Someone posted a video online." She bit her lip. "You played like I don't know how to describe it. Like the music was coming from somewhere deep inside you. How do you do that? How do you make it more than just notes?" Marcus thought about the question, about the years of grief and loss and hidden practice that had informed his playing that night. "You have to be willing to be vulnerable," he said finally. "To let people see what you're really feeling. That's scary, especially when you're young. But that's where the power is. Not in perfect technique, but in honest emotion." Sophie nodded slowly, absorbing this. "I want to play like that someday." "Then you will, if you're willing to do the work and take the risk." Marcus smiled at her. "I'll help you get there." After she left, Victoria emerged from the back of the hall where she'd been observing. "You're good at this. Teaching, I mean. I used to do it before he didn't finish the sentence. Before it was becoming easier to talk about, but it still hurt. You gave them something they needed. Not just technical instruction, but inspiration." Victoria walked beside him toward the exit. "That's rare, Marcus. Don't underestimate what you have to offer." The 2 weeks before Marcus officially started his new position passed in a strange suspension of time. He continued his janitorial shifts, saying goodbye to coworkers who now looked at him with a mixture of respect and confusion. He packed up the small apartment that had been his hiding place for so long, sorting through belongings, deciding what to keep and what to let go. The new apartment Victoria had arranged was on the 3rd floor of the Harrison Center's residence building. It was modest but comfortable, with 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, and large windows that let in streams of sunlight. Lily claimed her room immediately, delighting in the fact that she had a closet big enough to stand in and a window that looked out over the city. But the best part, for both of them, was the practice room 2 floors down that Marcus now had unlimited access to. Every evening after dinner, they would go down together and Marcus would give Lily a piano lesson. Her progress continued to be extraordinary. Within 2 weeks, she could play simple pieces with both hands, could read basic notation, and had developed an intuitive understanding of musical phrasing that most students took years to acquire. "She's gifted," David Park said one evening when he stopped by to visit and heard Lily practicing. "Seriously gifted, Marcus. Have you thought about formal training for her?" "She's 10, Marcus replied, though he'd been thinking the same thing. "I don't want to push her too hard. I'm not talking about pushing. I'm talking about nurturing." David listened as Lily worked through a simple Mozart piece, her small fingers finding the notes with increasing confidence. Kids like this, they need structure, guidance. They need to be challenged. Marcus knew David was right. But the thought of Lily entering the world of competitive classical music, of auditions and performances and pressure, made him uneasy. He'd seen what that world could do to young musicians, how it could turn joy into anxiety, gift into obligation. 3 months into his position as artist-in-residence, Marcus had settled into a rhythm that felt both foreign and deeply right. His days were filled with teaching, practicing, and preparing for performances. The youth orchestra was thriving under his guidance, their spring showcase selling out weeks in advance. His master classes were drawing students students from across the region, young pianists eager to learn from the man who had seemingly appeared from nowhere with such extraordinary talent. But it was the evenings with Lily that Marcus treasured most. Every night after dinner, they would descend to the practice room, and for an hour, the world would narrow to just the two of them and the music. Lily's progress had continued to accelerate in ways that both thrilled and unsettled him. She was now working on pieces that students twice her age struggled with, and she approached them with an unself-conscious joy that reminded him of why he'd fallen in love with music in the first place. One Tuesday evening, Marcus was running late for orchestra rehearsal. He'd been in back-to-back masterclasses all afternoon, and one had run long when a student broke down crying about performance anxiety. By the time Marcus had talked her through it, offered encouragement and practical strategies, he was 20 minutes behind schedule. "Lily, I have to run to rehearsal," he called, grabbing his jacket. "Can you practice by yourself for a bit? I'll be back in 2 hours." "Can I use the big piano?" Lily asked, referring to the Steinway Grand in the main practice room, the one Marcus typically reserved for his own practice session. Marcus hesitated. The instrument was valuable, and Lily was still young, but she'd been careful with every piano she'd touched, treating each one with the reverence he'd taught her. "Okay, but be gentle, and lock the door when you're done." "I will. Love you, Daddy. Love you too." Lily Bell. Lily waited until she heard her father's footsteps fade down the hallway before making her way to the main practice room. It was larger than the smaller studios, with high ceilings and excellent acoustics. The Steinway sat in the center like a beautiful sleeping giant, its black lacquer surface gleaming under the soft lights. She approached it with the same mixture of excitement and respect she always felt around fine instruments. Her father had taught her that a piano was more than wood and strings and hammers. It was a living thing with its own voice and personality, and you had to listen to it, work with it, coax out its song rather than force it. Lily sat on the bench, adjusting it the way her father had shown her, and placed her hands on the keys. She'd been working on a piece by Debussy, Clair de Lune, and though it was technically beyond her level, something about it called to her. The way the melody floated and shimmered, the way it captured something that felt like moonlight on water, like her mother's face in the photographs she studied every night before bed. She began to play, and the Steinway responded with a richness and depth that took her breath away. The notes bloomed under her fingers, each one perfect and clear, and Lily found herself lost in the music the way she'd seen her father get lost, where the rest of the world disappeared and there was nothing but sound and emotion and the conversation between heart and hand. Meanwhile, Victoria was working late in her office, reviewing contracts and budgets, the mundane administrative work that kept the Harrison Center running. She'd been at it for hours and needed a break, so she decided to walk through the building, checking on things, making sure everything was secure for the night. As she passed the practice room corridor, she heard it, piano music floating through the hallway like something from a dream. It was beautiful, technically proficient, and imbued with an emotional depth that made her stop walking and just listen. For a moment, she assumed it was Marcus, but no, he was with the youth orchestra. She'd seen him head that direction an hour ago. Curious, Victoria followed the sound of the main practice room. The door was slightly ajar, and through the gap, she could see someone at the piano. Someone small. Someone with dark hair and pigtails, wearing jeans and a purple sweater. Victoria's breath caught in her throat. It was Lily. Marcus's 10-year-old daughter was playing Debussy's Clair de Lune with a sensitivity and technical skill that seemed impossible for someone her age. The child's hands moved across the keys with confidence, her small body swaying slightly with the music's emotional current. She was making mistakes here and there. The piece was clearly stretching her abilities, but the musical intelligence behind the playing was unmistakable. Victoria stood frozen in the hallway, her hand pressed against the wall, listening in stunned disbelief. She'd heard child prodigies before. The Harrison Center occasionally hosted young performers, kids who'd been training intensively since they could walk. But this was different. This wasn't the result of rigorous training and endless repetition. This was raw, natural talent expressing itself with an honesty that was almost painful to witness. The piece reached its climactic section, the part where the melody soars and the harmonies become almost unbearably beautiful. And Lily played it with a passion that seemed to come from somewhere beyond her 10 years of experience. She played like someone who understood loss, who knew what it meant to long for something just out of reach. Victoria realized she was crying. Tears were streaming down her face, and she didn't fully understand why. Perhaps it was the beauty of the music itself, or perhaps it was witnessing this miracle, this child who had inherited her father's extraordinary gift, or perhaps it was the recognition of something she'd been feeling since the night she first heard Marcus play, the profound privilege of witnessing true artistic genius in its purest form. When the piece ended, Lily sat for a moment with her hands still on the keys, breathing hard. She'd just finished running a race. Then she looked up and saw Victoria standing in the doorway, tears on her face, and her eyes went wide with worry. "I'm sorry," Lily said quickly, standing up from the bench. "I know I'm not supposed to be here. Please don't be mad at my dad. He said I could practice, and I just don't apologize." Victoria's voice was hoarse. She stepped into the room, moving closer to the piano, to this remarkable child. "Lily, how long have you been playing?" 3 months. Well, 3 months officially. But I used to listen to my dad at night back when we lived in the old apartment. Sometimes I'd hear him playing and I'd dream about the music. 3 months. Victoria felt dizzy. "Who taught you that piece?" "My dad showed me the beginning part. but then I listened to a recording online and learned the rest by myself. Is that okay? I know I made mistakes. You made very few mistakes. And the mistakes you did make don't matter. Victoria sat down on a nearby chair, needing to steady herself. Lily, you play like... She stopped, struggling to find words that wouldn't frighten the child. You play beautifully, exceptionally. Do you understand what that means? Lily shook her head, looking uncertain. It means you have a gift, a very rare, very special gift. Victoria leaned forward. Does your father know how good you are? He says I'm learning fast, but I think he's just being nice because he's my dad. Victoria let out a shaky laugh. Marcus had no idea. He'd been so focused on protecting Lily, on giving her a normal childhood, that he hadn't fully grasped what he had here. His daughter wasn't just talented. She was potentially one of those once-in-a-generation musician kind who redefined what was possible. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made them both turn. Marcus appeared in the doorway, slightly out of breath. Lily, I thought you'd be... He stopped when he saw Victoria. Saw the tears still glistening on her face, saw the expression she wore. What happened? Is everything okay? Victoria stood slowly, her eyes moving from Marcus to Lily and back again. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, filled with awe and something that might have been fear. That's your daughter playing. I just heard your 10-year-old daughter play Debussy like she's been studying for years. Marcus looked at Lily, who gave him a small, nervous smile. I practiced the piece you showed me, and then I learned the rest from a video. The rest? Marcus moved to the piano, picked up the sheet music that was sitting on the stand. His face went pale. Lily, this is a grade 8 piece. This is something I wouldn't have attempted until I was 15, but I wanted to play it. It sounded like moonlight. The simplicity of her response seemed to undo Marcus completely. He sank onto the piano bench, staring at his daughter as if seeing her for the first time. Play it for me, he said softly. Play it from the beginning. Lily looked uncertain, but she climbed back onto the bench beside her father. She placed her hands on the keys, took a breath, and began to play. This time, with her father beside her, her playing took on an even deeper dimension. She played for him, expressing things she couldn't put into words. Her love for him, her memories of the mother she barely knew, her joy in this new life they were building together. Marcus watched his daughter's hands move across the keys, and Victoria watched Marcus, saw the exact moment comprehension dawn. His daughter wasn't just gifted, she was extraordinary. And unlike him, she hadn't spent 10 years hiding her gift. She was young enough, fresh enough, that the world hadn't yet taught her to be afraid of her own brilliance. When Lily finished, Marcus pulled her into a tight hug. You're amazing, he whispered into her hair. You're so much more amazing than I ever realized. Victoria cleared her throat softly. Both father and daughter looked at her, and she saw in their faces the same eyes, the same intensity, the same deep well of musical understanding. We need to talk, she said, both of you, about Lily's future. Marcus's expression became guarded immediately. She's 10. She needs to be a kid, not a performer. I agree completely. Victoria held up her hands. But Marcus, you of all people should understand. A gift like this doesn't wait patiently for the right time. It demands to be nurtured, developed, protected. She looked at Lily. How would you feel about studying music more seriously? Not performing it, but learning with some of the best teachers in the world. Lily's face lit up with an excitement that answered the question before she spoke. Really? I could do that? If your father agrees. Victoria's gaze moved to Marcus. I know this scares you. I know you want to protect her from the pressure, the competition, the potential for disappointment, but denying her this opportunity would be a different kind of harm. She deserves the chance to become everything she can be. Marcus didn't answer immediately. He looked at his daughter, at her hopeful face, at the joy that music brought her, and he felt the familiar weight of parental responsibility pressing down on him. Every decision he made now would shape her future, and the stakes felt impossibly high. That night, after Lily had gone to bed, Marcus sat alone in the practice room with the lights dimmed, his hands resting on the piano keys without playing. His mind was a storm of conflicting thoughts and fears. He'd spent 10 years sacrificing everything to keep Lily safe, fed, and happy. He'd given up his career, his identity, his dreams, all to ensure she had the stability he could provide. And now, just as he was reclaiming his own musical life, he was being asked to potentially thrust her into a world that had once broken him. The door opened quietly. Victoria stepped in, 2 cups of coffee in her hands. I saw the light on. Thought you might need this. Single quotes. Marcus accepted the cup gratefully. I can't stop thinking about what she'll face if we do this. The pressure, the criticism, the constant comparison to other musicians. She's just a child, she is. Victoria sat on the bench beside him, but she's also an artist. And artists need to create, Marcus. It's not optional for people like you and Lily. It's as necessary as breathing. What if she burns out? What if the pressure destroys her love of music? What if I'm setting her up for the same heartbreak I experienced? His voice cracked slightly. I barely survived losing everything, Victoria. I can't watch my daughter go through that. Victoria was quiet for a long moment, sipping her coffee. Can I tell you a story? Marcus nodded. When I was 16, I wanted to be an opera singer. I had a good voice, nothing extraordinary, but good enough to get into conservatory. My parents were thrilled. They paid for the best teachers, sent me to summer programs, planned my entire future. She smiled sadly. I hated it. The constant judgment, the competition with other singers, the way every note I produced was analyzed and critiqued. By the time I was 19, I couldn't sing anymore. Not because I'd lost my voice, but because I'd lost any joy in using it. I'm sorry, don't be. I found my way to arts administration, and I love what I do. I get to help real artists flourish. She turned to face him. But here's the thing. I wasn't a real artist. I was someone with modest talent and big dreams. If I'd been forced to stop, it would have been a disappointment, not a tragedy. But you're different. When you were forced to stop playing something and you died, I heard it in your music that first night. I heard all those years of silenced songs crying out to be heard. Marcus closed his eyes, acknowledging the truth of her words. Lily has that same fire in her. I saw it tonight when she played. If you try to protect her from music's challenges by keeping her from music itself, you won't be protecting her. You'll be suffocating her. Victoria's voice was gentle but firm. The question isn't whether to let her pursue music, it's how to help her pursue it in a healthy way. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to let her be an artist without letting the world damage her. Then we'd figure it out together. Victoria squeezed his shoulder. We find her the best teachers, but we also make sure she has time to be a kid. We create opportunities for her to perform, but we don't force her. We celebrate her gifts while also celebrating who she is beyond the music. It's a balance, Marcus, not an either or. Marcus thought about this, about the possibility of a different path than the one he'd walked, a path where music was nurtured without becoming all-consuming, where excellence was pursued without sacrificing joy. She'd need a teacher, someone who understands not just technique but artistry. I have someone in mind, Catherine Yu. She taught at Juilliard for 20 years before retiring here. She only takes a few private students now, and she's very select, but I think if she heard Lily play, she'd make an exception. And if Lily decides later that this isn't what she wants, if she wants to quit and do something else entirely, Victoria smiled, then we support that too. The goal isn't to create a famous pianist, Marcus. It's to help your daughter become whoever she's meant to be. If that's a musician, wonderful. If it's something else entirely, equally wonderful. The next morning, Marcus sat down with Lily over breakfast. She was eating cereal and swinging her legs under the table, looking like any other 10-year-old. And for a moment, he wanted to preserve this simplicity forever. But he remembered Victoria's words. Lily was an artist, and artists need to create. Lily, we need to talk about your music, he began. She looked up, suddenly serious. Am I in trouble? No, the opposite. Marcus took a breath. You're very talented. More talented than I realized. Miss Ashford thinks you should study with a special teacher, someone who can help you develop your gift properly. Lily's eyes widened. Really? Like a real teacher? A very good one. But this would mean practicing more, working harder, taking music more seriously. And I need to know if that's something you really want, not just something you think I want. Lily was quiet for a moment, pushing her cereal around her bowl. When I play, she said slowly, it feels like I'm talking to Mom, like she can hear me and I can hear her even though she's gone. Is that weird? Marcus felt his throat tight. No, baby, that's not weird at all. That's exactly what music is for. Then yes, I want to learn more. I want to get better so I can say more things to her, so I can say things to you and to other people too. She looked at him with Elena's eyes. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. Okay, we'll do this together. But there are rules. You still have to do your regular schoolwork. You still have to play with friends. And if it ever stops being fun, if it ever feels like too much, you tell me immediately. Promise? Promise. 2 weeks later, Marcus and Lily sat in Catherine Yu's elegant living room, surrounded by photographs of the legendary teacher's illustrious career. Catherine herself was in her 70s, small and sharp-eyed, with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. She listened to Marcus explain Lily's background or lack thereof, with polite skepticism. 3 months of instruction, Catherine repeated, her accent carrying traces of her native Taiwan. And you say she's working on intermediate repertoire? Advanced intermediate. Marcus correct. She taught herself most of it. Catherine's expression suggested she'd heard ambitious parental claims before and remained unconvinced. Play something for me, child, she said to Lily, gesturing to the grand piano that dominated the room. Lily looked at her father, who nodded encouragingly. She walked to the piano and sat, taking a moment to adjust the bench and feel the instrument's touch. Then she began to play the Debussy Clair de Lune. Marcus watched Catherine's face carefully, saw the moment her polite skepticism vanished, replaced by something between shock and reverence. The older woman leaned forward in her chair, her trained ear catching every nuance, every moment of musical intelligence that Lily displayed. When the piece ended, Catherine sat back slowly, her hand pressed to her chest. How old did you say she was? Her voice was barely above a whisper. 10. She'll be 11 next month. Catherine stood and walked to the piano, looking down at Lily with an expression Marcus couldn't quite read. Child, do you know what you have? Lily shook her head. You have a gift that comes along perhaps once in a generation, maybe less often than that. Catherine turned to Marcus. I will teach her, but understand this. She will work harder than she's ever worked. I will demand excellence, discipline, absolute dedication. Wait, Marcus interjected. That's not what we want her to love music, not be crushed by it. Catherine smiled and her stern expression softened. Of course she must love it. That's the foundation of everything. But love alone isn't enough, Mr. Chun. Love needs skill to express itself fully. Passion needs discipline to sustain itself over time. She placed a hand on Lily's shoulder. I will teach her to be not just a gifted player, but a complete musician. And yes, I will push her. But I will also listen to her, protect her, nurture her joy even as I shape her technique. This is what I do. This is what I've done for 40 years. Marcus looked at Lily, who was practically vibrating with excitement. He thought of his own journey, of the years of rigorous training that had given him the tools to express the music that lived inside him. He thought of how that training had sustained him even through the darkest years, how the discipline had been there waiting when he finally returned to playing. "Okay," he said finally, "but we do this on our terms. If Lily ever says she wants to stop, then she stops." Catherine's eyes were kind but firm. "Mr. Chun, I am not a monster. I have seen too many young talents destroyed by pushy parents and unforgiving teachers. I have no interest in creating another casualty, but I also have no interest in letting genuine genius languish from lack of proper guidance." She turned to Lily. "You will study with me twice a week. You will practice 1 hour every day, no more, no less. You will continue your regular school, your friends, your normal life. Music will be part of your life, not all of your life. Agreed?" Lily nodded solemnly. "Agreed." "Good. We start next week." Catherine escorted them to the door, but as Marcus was leaving, she touched his arm. "I heard your performance at the gala. The video is all over the classical music forums. You play beautifully, Mr. Chun, but I think your daughter may surpass you." Marcus felt a complex mixture of pride and fear at the prediction. "I hope she does. I hope she has the career I couldn't have, the life I couldn't give her." Perhaps. Catherine's smile was enigmatic. Or perhaps she forged an entirely different path. The beauty of genuine talent is that it always finds its own way of expressing itself. Our job is simply to clear the obstacles from the path. 18 months later, the Harrison Performing Arts Center was preparing for its most anticipated event of the season. The spring showcase had become something of a legend in the classical music community, thanks largely to the transformation of the youth orchestra under Marcus Chun's direction. But this year was different. This year, the program included something unprecedented. Victoria stood in her office, reviewing the evening's schedule one final time. The showcase would feature the youth orchestra performing the Shostakovich they'd worked so hard to perfect, several solo performances from the most advanced students, and then at the very end, something special. She looked down at the program notes she'd written, her hand trembling slightly as she read her own words. "The evening will conclude with a duet performance featuring our artistine residents Marcus Chun and his daughter Lily Chun, age 11. It had been Lily's idea. After 18 months of study with Catherine Yu, after countless hours of practice and steady, remarkable growth, she had approached her father with a simple request. Quote, "I want to play with you, Daddy, in front of people, like a real concert." Marcus had been terrified. Despite all his efforts to create a healthy relationship between Lily and music, he'd been protective about her performing publicly. She'd played in student recitals at Catherine's studio, small, intimate gatherings where the pressure was minimal. But this was different. This was a sold-out performance in a major venue, with critics and press and hundreds of people watching. Catherine had been the one to convince him. "She's ready, Marcus. More importantly, she wants this. Let her show the world what she can do, on her own terms, with you beside her." Dots. Single quotes now. As evening approached, Marcus found himself backstage in his familiar dressing room, but this time, Lily had her own space right next door. Through the wall, he could hear Catherine giving her last-minute encouragement, the older teacher's voice calm and reassuring. When Catherine emerged, she met Marcus in the hallway. "She's completely focused," Catherine reported. "No nerves at all. I think she's more excited than anxious." "That makes one of us," Marcus admitted. His hands were shaking. Catherine smiled knowingly. "You're not nervous about your own playing. You're nervous about being a father watching his child take a leap. That's very different." She was right. Marcus realized his fear had nothing to do with music and everything to do with love. He wanted this to be perfect for Lily. He wanted the audience to see what he saw. Wanted the world to recognize her extraordinary gift without crushing her under the weight of expectation. The youth orchestra performed brilliantly, their Shostakovich bringing the audience to their feet. Sophie, the violinist who had questioned Marcus 18 months ago about playing with genuine emotion, delivered a solo performance of such maturity and passion that several people in the front rows were openly crying. The evening was already a triumph, and then it was time. Victoria walked onto the stage to introduce the final performance. Marcus watched from the wing, Lily standing beside him in a simple blue dress that Elena would have loved. She was holding his hand not out of fear but out of connection. The way they'd stood together in their old apartment kitchen, in practice rooms, and all the ordinary and extraordinary moments of their life together. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria began, her voice carrying through the hall with the authority that came naturally to her now. "When I first heard Marcus Chun play, it was late at night when he thought no one was listening. He was playing for himself, or perhaps for someone who was no longer here to hear him. What I witnessed that night changed my life and changed this institution. We gained not just a talented artist in residence, but a teacher, a mentor, and a friend." She paused, her eyes finding Marcus in the wings. "What I didn't know that night was that we would gain something even more precious. Please welcome Marcus Chun and his daughter Lily for a very special performance." The applause was warm and encouraging. Marcus and Lily walked onto the stage hand in hand, and for a moment, Marcus was transported back to that first terrifying performance at the gala. But this time was different. He wasn't alone. He wasn't trying to prove he still existed. He was sharing this moment, this gift, with the person he loved most in the world. They sat at the piano together, Lily on his left, both of them adjusting their positions on the bench. The piece they'd chosen was one Marcus had written himself. Rachmaninoff composed late at night during those early months at the Harrison Center when his life was transforming. It was a duet, specifically crafted so that their hands would interweave on the keyboard, their melodies supporting and answering each other in a musical conversation. Marcus had titled it Elena's Garden, and it was his attempt to capture everything he'd never been able to say to his wife. The piece began with Lily's part, a simple, questioning melody in the upper register, like a child asking where her mother had gone. Marcus's part answered, deeper and richer, providing comfort and context, telling her stories about the woman she barely remembered. As they played, Victoria stood in the wings where Marcus had stood that first night, and she felt tears streaming down her face. The music was beautiful, yes, technically accomplished and emotionally resonant, but what made it transcendent was watching the relationship between father and daughter expressed through sound. Every note Lily played showed the teaching Marcus had given her, the patience, the love, the careful guidance. Every response Marcus offered showed his pride, his hope, his determination to give her everything he'd lost. Their hands moved across the keyboard in perfect synchronization, sometimes playing together in harmony, sometimes splitting apart to create counterpoint, always in conversation. The piece moved through several sections, each one representing a different emotional landscape. There was grief, but also joy. There was loss, but also celebration of the love that remained. The middle section featured Lily taking the lead, her part becoming more complex and confident, while Marcus's part shifted to support her melody rather than lead it. It was a musical representation of watching his daughter grow, of learning to trust her instincts, of accepting that she was becoming her own artist with her own voice. Victoria saw several musicians in the audience lean forward, recognizing the sophistication of the composition, the way it captured something universal about parenthood and legacy. As the piece built toward its conclusion, both parts came together in a final statement of the theme, playing in unison now, stronger together than either had been alone. The final chord rang out through the hall, sustained by both sets of hands. Father and daughter creating one perfect sound that seemed to hang in the air long after their fingers lifted from the keys. The silence that followed was profound, almost sacred. Then the audience erupted. People didn't just stand. They cheered, they whistled, they called out their approval with genuine emotion. But Marcus barely heard them. He was looking at Lily, at her face glowing with joy and accomplishment, and he saw in her eyes the reflection of everything they'd been through together, everything they'd survived and built. "We did it, Daddy," she whispered, throwing her arms around him. "You did it, sweetheart," he corrected, hugging her back. "You were perfect." They stood and bowed together, and the applause grew even louder. Victoria watched from the wings as Marcus and Lily took bow after bow, the audience refusing to let them leave the stage. This was what the Harrison Center was meant for, she thought. Not just showcasing established talent, but nurturing new voices, supporting artists through their struggles, creating space for miracles to unfold. Later, after the crowds had dispersed and the congratulations had been offered and accepted, Marcus and Victoria found themselves alone in the now quiet concert hall. Lily had gone home with Catherine, who had promised her ice cream and stories about famous pianists she'd known. Marcus stood on the empty stage, looking out at the rows of seats, remembering that night 18 months ago when he'd been caught playing in secret. "That's my daughter playing," Victoria said softly, echoing the words that had become something of a legend around the Harrison Center. The CEO's shocked whisper when she'd first discovered Lily's gift had spread through the staff, becoming a touchstone moment in the organization's history. Marcus smiled. "She's something special, isn't she? She's extraordinary. But so are you, Marcus. What you've built here, what you've taught, not just Lily, but all those students in the youth orchestra. The way you've shown people that it's possible to come back from losing everything, that's the real gift." Marcus walked to the edge of the stage, looking up at the empty balcony where so many people had watched tonight. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night, when you found me here, playing?" "I said it was extraordinary. You said it was the most moving musical experience of your life." Marcus turned to face her. "You gave me back something I thought was gone forever. You gave me permission to be myself again." Victoria's eyes shone with emotion. "You were always yourself, Marcus. You were just hiding. All I did was turn on the lights." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, two people who had forged an unlikely friendship through music and mutual respect. Then Marcus checked his watch. "I should get home. Lily will be wound up from the performance for hours." "Of course. Oh, before you go," Victoria pulled an envelope from her jacket pocket. "This came today. An invitation for you and Lily to perform at the National Concert Hall in Washington. They're doing a series on family duets, and they specifically requested you to." Marcus took the envelope, feeling its weight, the significance of what it represented. More opportunities, more performances, a future full of music and possibility for both him and his daughter. "I'll talk to Lily about it. See what she wants." That's exactly the right answer. Victoria walked with him toward the stage door. "You know what the best part of this whole story is? It's not the triumphant return or the discovered prodigy or any of that. It's that you figured out how to do it right the second time. You learned how to balance the music with the life, the gift with the person. That's the real victory." Marcus thought about this as he left the Harrison Center, walking out into the cool night air. He thought about Alina, about how she'd believed everyone had a song inside them and you just had to be quiet enough to hear it. He'd found his song again, and now he was helping Lily find hers. But this time, with wisdom born from pain, with protection born from love. When he got home to their apartment, he found Lily and Catherine in the living room, Lily demonstrating a difficult passage from a new piece she was learning. Catherine looked up when Marcus entered, her stern face softening into a smile. "Your daughter is going to be one of the greats," she said simply. "She already is," Marcus replied, and he meant it, not because of her technical skill or her potential for fame, but because she approached music with pure joy, with honest emotion, with the understanding that the gift wasn't for keeping, but for sharing. That night, after Catherine had gone home and Lily was finally in bed, Marcus sat at the small upright piano in their living room. He played softly, not wanting to wake her, playing Elena's favorite nocturne the way he'd played it on their wedding day, on the day she died, and countless times in between. He played with gratitude for the life they'd shared, for the daughter they'd created, for the music that had sustained him through the darkest times. From her bedroom, Lily heard the music in her half-sleep and smiled. She understood what her father was saying, understood the language of love expressed through melody and harmony. And somewhere in her dreams, she imagined her mother listening too, proud of what they'd become, proud of how they'd honored her memory, not by holding on to grief, but by choosing joy, choosing music, choosing life. The janitor who became a pianist, and his daughter who might become a legend. This was their story. But more than that, it was a story about resilience, about the courage to reclaim what was lost, about the gift of second chances, and about the quiet miracle that happens when someone sees you, truly sees you, and helps you remember who you were always meant to be.